welcome to Early Care Connection. I'm Izzy Greenberg. Today we have our resident panel of experts, Merrill Gay from the Connecticut Early Childhood Alliance and Ava Bermúdez Zimmerman from the Child Care for Connecticut's Future campaign. I would like to start by thanking Sandra for providing interpretation for us this morning and remind everyone to speak slowly enough that everyone in here can get the information they need. A reminder to use chat as a place to share information with each other, and the Q&A as a place to ask questions of panelists. Okay, so let's get started. I know we've had a few weeks off. February is a tough month. It's like summer vacation from these in the winter. But after 2 holidays, we are back at it, and the legislative session is in full swing. And so I am just going to turn it right over to Merrill and Ava to give us some updates. Merrill, why don't you get started actually with the federal update? We'll get that out of the way, and then we will move into Connecticut state legislative session, which has not to say more work for you to do, but different work for you to do. Okay, Merrill, go for it. You've got the floor.
Okay, so Congress is a total mess right now. It's a split government, so you've got Republicans in control of the House and Democrats in the control of the Senate. They are trying to pass a budget for the fiscal year that started in September, or I guess October 1st. But they typically do 12 different bills that all come together into one bill. And as long as we've had divided government, they've frequently ended up doing continuing resolutions where they just basically say, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing we'll keep doing it for the rest of the year, or we'll keep doing it until such and such a date. This year, they've split it into 2 different sections. So there's one batch of agencies that have funding through the end of February. So on March 1st, if they have not passed something, those sections of the federal government close down. They include the Department of Agriculture, military construction, a bunch of other agencies. And then most agencies, their budgets are up on March 8th. So unless Congress passes a budget or a continuing resolution for those sections of the budget, the government shuts down. And that's mostly a big inconvenience. Eventually, all of the federal employees all get paid. And eventually they'll start, the federal government starts paying its bills again. But it's just kind of an ongoing mess. It gets worse on April 1st because the negotiators understood that they frequently have trouble getting to a deal, and they put in place a 1% across the board cut to the budgets if they have to go beyond April 1st with a continuing resolution. Now, 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but you're already halfway through the year, so it's really a 2% cut for the remainder of the year. And it's a 2% cut in big categories. They sometimes say, well, we've got to protect this thing, which means everything else in that line item has to get cut more. That is the concern about the Child Care Development Block Grant that provides funding to Connecticut to use for Care for Kids. So we're worried about that. So what has happened over the last couple of weeks is that the House of Representatives has been on vacation. They don't come back until Wednesday, and Friday is their deadline to pass something. In part, that's because the leadership in the House understands that the House is so dysfunctional right now that they've got to essentially have a deal that is you got to vote on this or the government shuts down in order to get them to do anything. It's the issue that it's a very close a very small majority for the Republicans. They've only got 5 more votes than the Democrats, which means that if they lose 3 votes who vote with the Democrats, they lose their majority on something. It gives a lot of power to a small group of legislators, and there's a small group of hard right legislators who keep coming up with all sorts of things that they want to use to shut everything down. And they threaten the speaker with his speakership if he doesn't go along with them. So it's a hard thing to get the House to vote on something. And typically the only way that you get a deal with a Democratic-controlled Senate is for a few Republicans to break off and vote with the Democrats in the House to pass something that can get through the Senate. So lots of drama in Washington. We will see whether or not they get a deal. The plan was they were going to negotiate something this past weekend and have a deal ready for the House and the Senate to take up this week. They did not reach a deal on the weekend and came out pointing fingers at each other about who was to blame. So we shall see what happens there. I don't know that there's really anything I could ask you to do to try and change someone's mind. This is mostly a matter of whether or not Speaker Johnson can corral either a full majority of his caucus, the Republican caucus, to vote for something that'll pass the Senate, or if he is willing to put up with the potential blowback if he sides with does a bipartisan deal in the House, where folks on his far right may decide to oust him as Speaker. So that's the federal update.
Eva, I can see your hand is up. Do you want to jump in?
I have a quick question for Merrill on the federal update. So Merrill, you and I and Izzy, we were all there years ago. I want to say maybe already 7 years ago when the federal government had some sort of standstill or budget cut. Connecticut was impacted and we lost Care for Kids funding. And then it took some time and it took a lot of the work from providers and parents coming together to get that money back in from Connecticut to make up for the federal cuts. Would that happen here?
Okay, so that was not actually a federal cut. That
Okay.
was the issue there was that in 2016, the legislature passed a bill to change eligibility for Care for Kids to bring it into compliance with something that had been put into the federal law that the federal government was not actually enforcing yet. We were proactive, but the issue was we didn't put enough money in the state budget to be able to fund it. That's why we shut down Care for Kids from 2016 to 2017. So that's not the issue. The issue is there may be a cut in the Child Care Development Block Grant coming to Connecticut if we don't have a federal budget by April 1st. Now, the way that those federal grants work, you get 2.5 years to spend them. So they do get spread across the state budget years. And I don't know whether we'll see an immediate, scaling back on Care for Kids if there's a problem on April 1st, but it's something we worry about because the federal dollars are a big chunk of Care for Kids.
Okay. Do you guys want to move into the state stuff? Merrill, do you want to get us started on, what's been happening over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I know
Sure.
both of you have been very involved. There's been some hearings already. How did you feel those went? What's the momentum? And how do you see us moving forward in the session?
So we've had a couple of hearings now in appropriations and in the Education Committee. So the challenge is that early care and education was one of the few things that got an increase in the governor's budget adjustments. And he got that, we're getting $20 million more out of the general fund, plus some ARPA dollars, plus some bonding. To get $20 million out of the general fund, he had to take it from someplace else because there was only 11 million left between what had been appropriated already and the spending cap. He took it from money that had been in a deal last year for the K-12 system, basically funding magnet school tuition so that towns didn't have to pay tuition for their students going to magnet schools in other communities. That has created a lot of tension within the education community and the education committee, and a general, I guess people are not excited about that, how the governor is trying to fund early childhood. They all will say that early childhood is important and we ought to fund it, but the issue is they don't have enough money to do it and do what they said they were going to do last year for K-12. So this all gets down to we need to have some more money. Do you want to talk about the bill in finance that hasn't got a number yet, Ava?
Yeah. So because we need more money, right? And the governor's bill incorporates the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations that came out. As well, there's other bills that are coming out. For example, the Early Childhood Fund, that legislation that was passed last year, where you can put, pockets of money in there. In the Finance Committee hearing, we expect that there should be conversations there, just like in appropriations, about how to fund these legislative proposals. So far, because the legislature, works day to day, sometimes they don't have the ability to post legislative hearings or the times and the bills that they're going to discuss until 48 hours before the actual hearing. They haven't announced which bills they're going to be discussing, but we do expect in the Finance Committee hearing a conversation on the Early Childhood Fund, as well as funding for the Blue Ribbon Panel recommendations, as well as anything else that has to do with money. In preparation for that Finance Committee hearing, we do hope to have by the end of this week the legislative actual bills that should exist. Right now, they don't have bill numbers. They're ideas. People are working on them. For the Blue Ribbon Panel, they're referring to it as the governor's proposal. The legislative hearings that we have gone to so far, there are discussions on projects that the Office of Early Childhood has been working on. So I know some of you might have heard us ask you to talk about Bill 5051 as well as SB 152. Those have, a sprinkling of the Care for Kids subsidy and changes to the subsidy, as well as assistance for state centers, some clarity in language, additional support systems for apprenticeship. There's been discussions on the incubator as well. When we talk about these legislative proposals, if they don't have, everything we want or need, or if as a provider you feel like it's not doing enough, you could take an opportunity for the Finance Committee, because it is money, to infuse the importance of supplying more funding for early care and education as a whole. For example, if you want to remind those legislators that, Care for Kids has been on a very long waiting list, that is a perfect opportunity to share your story and tell them how your parents or how you have been affected by that. And then, remind them which legislation you want to support or oppose. If you're unsure if you're going to support or oppose a legislation, then you can contact the Early Childhood Alliance with Merrill, or Childcare for Connecticut's Future with me, to figure out as a whole, as a coalition or as an organization, which way we're going to go, if we're going to support or oppose. When it comes to the coalition conversations, supporting is a whole process. I do not make the decision as to I'm going to support this legislation and then tell all of you. I make sure to reach out to our partners and organizations and ask them, does this impact you positively or negatively? Should we come away and tell them this is an important legislation for us? So just know that there's a whole process in place before we make a decision based on how we're going to support or what we're going to support.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. John Catalan has his hand up. John, you can go ahead and join.
I didn't have my hand up, but I concur with what Merrill and Eva said.
You do have your hand up actively right now.
Okay. I'm just going to add, getting this early childhood education fund bill passed is going to be a tough lift. There's definitely going to be some opposition to it. And I think getting the administration on board to support it is going to be a very tough and difficult ask, because there are a lot of people in that building who feel the fiscal guardrails as far as maintaining fiscal sanity in this state is working. So it's going to be a tough lift for all of us to get that done.
Thanks, John. And can you just introduce yourself for folks who may not know you?
Oh, I'm John Catalan. I'm with the Connecticut Alliance of YMCAs.
Thank you. And John is up at the Capitol a lot, and definitely a voice alongside with Merrill and Ava and lots of others who are up there way more often than I want to be. It's much, but they're really in the know. So thank you for that. All right. So Merrill, it looks like you wanted to jump in. Is there something you wanted to join in with?
Yeah. So we do expect a hearing on another early childhood bill. They're still working on the language of that bill in the Education Committee, so they haven't scheduled it for a hearing yet. It won't be this week. It will be the following week, the first week of March, either on the 4th or the 6th. Some of the things that are being talked about in that bill are early educator wages and the idea of emulating what Kentucky has done for early educators, where the Kentucky version of Care for Kids provides childcare for early educators at no cost to the early educator. Essentially, they waive the income that you earn if you are an early educator, so that you get free childcare through Care for Kids, with Care for Kids paying no parent fee, or not. There's no parent fee for those early educators who are getting Care for Kids. And that's something that people have talked about as something that would help in recruitment. And I see Georgia's got her hand up, so you want to let Georgia talk?
I actually have a question, Merrill. Can you clarify, or do you have more information about that local governance structure that they are suggesting in the governor's bill?
So the way that school readiness funds have been used is that they go as grants to local communities, and then a local school readiness council helps to decide how those funds are going to get distributed. Those only exist in the communities that have school readiness. There are also state-funded child development centers that existed long before the school readiness law happened. The governor's bill proposes to change from grants to communities that then get subgranted out as contracts to providers, and instead have OEC contracted directly with childcare programs. But they don't want to give up the local input and local coordination. So what they will do is to change those school readiness councils from bodies that actually vote every 2 years as to which programs are going to get a contract, to having them do a needs assessment to inform the contracting process that will be every 5 years. And they are proposing to make this uniform. So school readiness and CDCs are all in one line item and one contracting system. And in those communities where there is a state-funded program, there isn't a school readiness council to do that needs assessment. So they are changing the name of school readiness councils to local governance partners, and they would expand those to be in not just the old school readiness communities, but also in the communities where there's a state-funded program, and make it possible for it sounds like, if you're doing a contract every 5 years, that they could then also offer those contracts in some communities that don't currently have a program. So there's a little bit of, since it's new, a little bit of uncertainty as to how all that will roll out. But the idea is to try and make it so that there is across the state a local input process to inform a state contracting process for state-funded childcare.
So is this a proposal to eliminate from the School Readiness Council the funds that, and so would the school readiness councils control funds, I guess is what I'm asking, or would that end?
The school readiness councils would be funded so that they could have a liaison who would help with monitoring and staffing the local governance partnership, I think is what they're calling it, to help them do that needs assessment, and to help sort of coordinate services locally, so that families and with young children are able to access services and do the transition to kindergarten and those sorts of things that have traditionally been school readiness council activities.
But they would no longer control funds.
They would no
and
longer
direct
be
funds.
the body that decides which program is getting funded. Right.
Okay.
I see Lori's got her hand up.
While she unmutes, just a reminder that the bill we were referring to, the Early Childhood Fund, as well as the subsidy waiver for childcare providers on Care for Kids, they don't have a bill number just yet.
Right.
All right. And Tammy, you are welcome to join.
Can I add, or is Lori going?
Nope, Lori, I think Lori, that was a mistake.
Okay, so just to follow up on that, Merrill, is that a fiscal year 25 or is that 2025? That the governance council?
Fiscal year 25. So starting in July would be
July 1st this year.
Yeah, they would have funding. Now it will take a while for a community that doesn't have a school readiness council to get it all organized to be able to have a new local governance partnership.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the other thing that is sort of in the fine print is the school readiness and CDC programs that have funding through CHIFA for a facilities grant. Those programs they have an intercept of their school readiness or CDC funds from the state to pay back their loan. And so they will just continue on with a contract. They will not have to go into the bidding process because the CHIFA loan lenders wouldn't want to have them all of a sudden not have a contract that could be intercepted.
All right. Georgia, did you raise your hand again?
Yes, I just want to talk about from the perspective of a family childcare provider, because and I guess this would be a question we would also ask OEC, and I know that they're meeting with state-funded centers this week, but have we clarified how family childcare providers are going to be able to access school readiness and CDC funds? Because I know that the law gave access to family childcare providers to school readiness funds, but the councils have from what we're hearing, the councils have not made a way for family childcare providers to really access those school readiness funds. And
Yep.
I know the CDC process, the state required an intermediary for family childcare providers to access the CDC funds. So have you heard any conversation about what the process is going to be for family childcare providers to access the school readiness and or the CDC funds? Is it going to be an intermediary that the OEC will use as a part of that RFP process? And what is the conversation about connecting family childcare providers with willing organizations that are, or organization that will be willing to serve as intermediaries?
So I have not heard any conversation about that, but I think that that is a good thing for us to be raising with OEC, because it obviously is a concern of a lot of providers as to how that's going to work. It'll be, something I can't imagine OEC deciding that they want to enter into, 300 new contracts with individual family childcare providers. I think that it's going to be through an intermediary, but I don't know at all how they're going to recruit or support those intermediaries to do the work. So that's a good set of questions to be asking OEC. And we've got a meeting with them next week, this week, so we'll raise it.
And Tammy, could I clear out your hand raised, or was that still valid? Nope, I think we're down. Okay, great. Go ahead, Ava, sorry.
On the meeting that we have with them this week, I don't want anyone on this call to imagine or think that we haven't discussed with them already the Care for Kids waiting list. I think every advocate on this call, all our kin, Circle, Tammy, Cove, Georgia, we've made it known in caucus meetings, in personal conversations, in conversations with the legislature. The waiting list is a little extreme. So on Early Care Connection, we've made attempts to try to get OEC on to have this discussion. We are still waiting for a date for them to respond.
Yep. So a couple more things about local councils. Joanne points out that it does say effective July 1, 2025, not July 1, 2024, which is the start of the fiscal year. So the end of the fiscal year for those new councils coming into effect. Deb Poirier asked about how's this going to work with organizations like TVCCA that serve a lot of communities out in a regional area. My understanding is that they are talking about doing regional, allowing local communities to form regions. But remember, they're not going to be the ones who decide who gets the funds. They will be doing local needs assessments to inform the grant making process. So they might, you might have a group of communities that come together to say, our school district is, our school districts are setting up pre-K, and what we really need is infant toddler care. And what we need to see that in the state contract, that you do more to get more infant toddler care. Or it might be the other way around. We've got 4 new family child carers in this area, and what we're really missing is preschool.
There's a few comments in the chat I wanted to just point out as well. Rafaela is advocating that we have a rethinking of the relationship with inspectors. That sometimes can be a very difficult experience, and it's hard sometimes for folks to know what their rights are and responsibilities in that relationship. So that's an interesting point, Rafaela. Kim had said that great job, everyone who testified. So this is a little bit old back in the chat, but I just want to point it out and then say that in the chat, I shared a link to a playlist of some early childhood folks testifying over the last few weeks. So if you want to see how others in our community are testifying on bills, you can go to that playlist. And I think we're caught up on the chat now. Sorry about that, guys. Go ahead.
On the Rafaela comment, there was for a year, I know it seems like I've been here forever, but for a year I did work for the state in the state of Massachusetts, doing union organizing for childcare there. And I found it very interesting that they took a very different approach. The state of Massachusetts, their version of OEC is ECC, or EEC, and they did their trainings with their inspectors with providers. So childcare centers, home-based providers were incorporated in those initial trainings of new employees coming on, to prove and show to the new employees, the new state inspectors, that their job is not a police officer, that their job is to create a safe environment, of course, for the child and the space, but also to be a support system for the provider. Every time that they do an inspection, and they're talking about regulations and they're talking about changes, it should come in with a more positive attitude and a positive conversation with that provider, that center, that home-based owner, than coming in as if they're looking and waiting for someone to mess up. So the only way to change that dynamic is by providers saying something.
Yeah, so Rafaela was actually requesting that we help facilitate a conversation with the Office of Early Childhood as a possible future topic. So good to get that on the list. I see we have a few hands raised, but this question came in first. Can you explain what is going on with the possibility of putting off the kindergarten cutoff? That is big news. I know kindergarten age change last year was kind of a surprise to a lot of folks. Districts have been scrambling to try to figure out how to make it work. Many have figured out what they're going to do, and now there's news that there's reconsideration of this. So I don't know if there's any news on that front, Merrill or Ava, and then John, I'll call on you next.
So if the Education Committee Chairman has any say, there will not be a delay in the kindergarten age change. He's made that pretty clear. And so, the question will be, do they come up with some more money to help support some more preschool for those 9,000 kids who won't be eligible for kindergarten this year? Or what? But it does not seem like there's a great deal of traction around the idea of pushing back the change in the kindergarten age.
So it's in the news, but that doesn't mean that it's realistic.
Yep.
Okay, John.
Yeah, I would just add that I've had this conversation with numerous legislators, and the issue is now all these municipalities are way ahead in their planning, and they're making the changes necessary to try to accommodate these families and children, and to put that, as they say, that toothpaste back in the tube now is a very difficult ask. And I can tell you legislators do not want to, I would say they're not very supportive of making any changes, unfortunately, just because of all the work the towns have already done to, prepare their local school districts.
Right. At this point,
Yeah.
we really do need to support districts in doing this the best way possible. And for some, that might mean, well, it's going to mean different things in different communities, the waivers. And Joanne is asking, will the Ed Committee remove the ability for parents to ask for a K exception for the fall of 2025?
I haven't heard anybody suggesting that, because they understand that they've created some problems and they need to create a sort of a pressure release valve. So I think that I haven't heard anybody talking about getting rid of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
In the press conference that the Connecticut Project held last week, there were a handful of parents that were also highlighting that the trickle-down effect on the kids, their own kids being affected, is not just the 4, going into 5 years old, but also the 2-year-olds that are becoming 3 years old. The costs, of course, think about the cost and think about the family dynamic. If you're not a parent of young children, but of course you're providers that interact with parents of young children all the time, to add an additional year for 2 or 3 kids when you're trying to figure out, just family planning and your finances is a disaster. So my hope is, if the legislature as a whole doesn't really want to consider redoing this legislation because it's just so far in the process with the towns, and I hear you, John, and I hear other lobbyists, then at least there should be a deeper dive in the waivers, in funding, in extra supports for those parents who are really struggling to figure out how in the world they're going to pay for an additional year of care.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really complicated. And there's a lot of, I'm in Middletown, and our district is really far along in creating a transition program. And it's like, now, we're enrolling children, we're screening children, there's a lot going on. It's like, how do you halt that now? That's pretty tough. Okay. Tammy asks, Merrill, can you please clarify the start date for the governance council? You mentioned something regarding areas where new councils would need to be created, and that would begin July 2025. But I might have misunderstood. Specifically, will this go into effect July 2024 or July 2025?
I'd have to go look at the bill that I referenced in the synopsis that I posted earlier. My understanding is that all of the school readiness two-year contracts that were supposed to come up for to be done again this year are just being extended a year because they want to make this transition as of July 2025 to the contracted system as opposed to the grant system.
Don't know if this helps you, Meryl.
Yeah, let's see here. Effective 125. So that's when they would start doing the grants to yeah, I'm just looking at this thing, and yeah, so the other piece here is that they will switch to paying programs per classroom, so that if you've got 11 kids enrolled, you can have that 11th kid in the classroom and work on enrolling the rest of the classroom, rather than hold off, tell that one who's ready to start today that, no, you can't start until we get the other 8 or 9 lined up, because we're not going to get paid enough to be able to support the teacher, that second teacher in the classroom. So that is another piece of this that I think providers in that state-funded system will support.
Okay. All right. Do you guys feel there's more that you want to report out on today? Ava, did you want to?
Announcements? I have announcements.
Okay. Hold on, real quick before we go into announcements, Meryl, let me just confirm you're good on legislative session update.
Yep. I
Yeah,
have an announcement tomorrow.
Yep. And then next, just for folks, next week, we've got a lot to talk about on the hearings that will be next week. The details of that will kind of be evolving over this week, and then we'll be able to give you a lot more information about it on Monday. So stay tuned for that. All right, Ava, let's get into announcements.
So we being Childcare for Connecticut Suture, my other hat, had an advocacy training on Wednesday last week, as well as this past Saturday. Shout out to John Catalan and Steffi Frias for doing a phenomenal job on the Saturday training, and shout out to Meryl, as well as Izzy and Daniela Larson and Jennifer Caraballo Perez for helping on the Wednesday. I am hoping to have the links for the recording of that training ready for you either end of day today or first in the morning tomorrow. So definitely by no later than tomorrow, check out the Childcare FORCT, childcare4ct.org website to access more information about the advocacy trainings that happened. and visit our YouTube channel, same handle, Childcare FORCT, to see our YouTube channel and recordings. In the meantime, if you do want to prepare for legislative testimony next week, just like prepare your mind and body and soul of what does testimony look like, then you can watch on the YouTube channel, Childcare 4CT, recordings of providers and parents who testified in the hearings that just happened last week and the week before. So hopefully we'll have the recordings up within a day. We'll also have, again, we're prepping this week. The team is prepping for testimony next week, where we'll give you a testimony builder. We'll have a testimony toolkit and the links up and ready, mapping out how you could sign up to testify in person or sign up to testify through a written document. And, you know, if you need any help walking you through any of this, feel free to contact us.
Great, thank you. And then Merrill, did you have any announcements you wanted to go over?
Yeah, tomorrow we have Dr. Dana Susskind from the TMW Institute in Chicago coming in to speak to the Early Childhood Caucus at the state capitol. Anybody is welcome to join us in room 1D at 9:30 tomorrow morning at the Legislative Office Building. We understand it will also be broadcast live on CTN. You can find the CTN link if you go to the CGA website, the Connecticut General Assembly website, and it has there'll be a link there right on the homepage on the right-hand side that you can go to CTN and find the sequence. If I get a link beforehand, I will put it out on the listserv. But Dr. Susskind is a cochlear implant surgeon who got very interested in the role of language acquisition in child's development. She's written a couple of books. Most recently, that was a book called Parent Nation, which is about how this country is so far behind all of our other developed, Western nations about supports for families. Paid time off when you have a child, support for early care and education, all of the things that make it easier to raise a child in Europe than it is to raise a child here or in Canada. Yeah.
I wasn't, excuse me, what is the Early Childhood Caucus's official name when people are actually looking for it on the calendar?
It says Early Childhood Caucus,
Okay.
and it's on Tuesday mornings. We typically meet every other Tuesday, and this week we're doing a special meeting with Dr. Susskind. So there will be the next one will be next week. It is in the calendar. It's not typically televised, although we do a link for people to participate remotely. It's a mixture of legislators and advocates. And we regularly have a bunch of people who join us on a Zoom link. It is Representative Cook's aide who provides who sends out the information about that. If you would like to participate, drop me an email and I can get you that link.
Great. And just for clarity, if folks are not able to join at 9:30 tomorrow, if it's on CTN, does that mean it will be recorded and they'll be able to watch it after the fact?
Yes, that's the way it usually works.
Okay, great. That's helpful. And I put links in the chat for folks who are interested in becoming a member of the Early Childhood Alliance. Don't forget that Merrill's work doesn't happen for nothing. This work happens because members of the Early Childhood Alliance, make it happen. And if you want to join the Child Care for Connecticut's Future list, I put both of those links in there, and so folks can get legislative updates, from both groups. One, you have to be a member of. It's a paid membership. It's totally worth it. And one is a free membership. And so you can use either or both of those links. They are back in the chat. And then we will, of course, be sending out through the ECE listserv the recording to Dr. Suskind's lecture tomorrow at the Early Childhood Caucus. Okay, is that it for everyone? Any other?
I got one more announcement.
Great.
We have a new, the Alliance has a new manager of membership and advocacy starting today. Yay. Vanessa Hawk is a former doula and mom of a couple little kids, and she will be joining us to work with the Alliance membership, build the Alliance membership, and ramp up our advocacy work. So next time I have the opportunity, I will introduce her to everybody. Excellent.
And congratulations. I know that it is a lot of work for one person. So this is fantastic for you. Just one update, since we had announced to everyone a few weeks ago that one of the state actions that many of us participate in, the Morning Without Childcare, the date had been announced. There was some pushback on that date. And I just want to update everyone that the Morning Without Childcare will be April 3rd this year. So please save the date, begin organizing your folks, and more information will be coming out soon about that. But just wanted to get that date on everyone's calendar. Okay, great. We are hot and heavy in the legislative session. And even though this is a short session, there's a little less that can be done than in a long session. It doesn't mean there's nothing to be done. And obviously, as you've heard today, there are some major things that folks are working on. And so I hope that that you'll just, there's small things that you can be doing through the course of the week. If you're on these email lists, here's today's 5-minute action. Here's, share out social media for the partners and advocates that you trust. Start to build their lists, share it out so that the message gets spread. There will be information on legislative hearings there, on the issues that are important this session. This is kind of the moment to make change. And we don't get that moment once the session ends. It's over. And then we have to start all over again. And so next Monday, we'll be giving you more information about next week's hearings. Don't be intimidated. They work for us. Don't forget that. And there are tiny little things that you can be doing without a lot of background knowledge, which of course you all have. You are the experts, but I understand how the process can be intimidating. There's tiny little things you can be doing all the time that are low lift, that are easy to fit into your day, and that make a huge difference. And of course, if you have more time, there's bigger things you can be doing. So just keep an eye out for that. And we will see you back here next week. All right. Thank you again, Sandra, for providing interpretation. Thank you, of course, to Ava and to Merrill, to John, Tammy, Georgia, to all of the folks here who lend their voice and are lending their expertise all the time to make this community stronger. Thank you to everyone. All right. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week. Thanks.